Hello students, welcome back to lecture 3 of Family Systems 2. Some information for you. I hope it's somewhat interesting. I find it interesting. We're going to look a little bit at the Milan School, which is on page 83 of your text. Milan School differs from the MRI School insofar as it's more about language, not so action-oriented, more about circular questioning and learning about the family through how it uses logic, language, and interactional sequencing. Big thing in family systems and where we're indebted to the Milan School is this concept of circular questioning, which you can see on page 84. Regardless of which theoretical model one chooses to practice, circular questions are perhaps one of the most useful techniques when working with more than one person in the room. Sorry, I'm twisting my tongue a little bit. It's because it's late, but I'm really excited to talk to you about this. Even though it's really late, I really am. Such questions help A, assess, and B, make overt the overall dynamics and the interactive patterns in the system, thereby reframing the problem for all participants. Just by circular questions, you can almost automatically start reframing. For example, I once had a family come to me complaining about a child's anger problem. After they described the child's anger problem, I inquired about how the rest of the family responds to the child's anger. The mother reported that she responded by getting frustrated and often yelled, and the father sharply corrected the child. As they listened to themselves describe their responses, both conceded that they responded to his anger with anger, and also noted that the younger sister disappeared into another room or somehow disengaged because of the intensity. As the parents began to look at their half of the interactional pattern, it became clear that the anger was highly quote-unquote contagious for the three of them, while it evoked anxiety in the daughter. These questions allowed the family to view their son's anger problem, quote-unquote, in the context of the broader interactional pattern, thus opening new options for relating. So you can see how this idea of circular questioning, getting the family to think about how the interactional patterns are manifesting, is actually itself an intervention. And the reason that I'm itching my face is because in between videos, my cat, actually two kitties, sat on my lap, and then I picked him up. Maybe I'll show you him. And then I got the hair on my hands, and then when I scratch my face now, there's hair on my face. I'm sorry, I know it's a little too much information. So let's look at some of the points that they are discussing about the circular questioning business. Behavioral sequence questions. Therapists use these questions to trace the entire sequence of behaviors that constitute the problem. Quote, after John got mad, what did mom do? What did dad do? What did his sister do? You see the roots of narrative therapy, and the notion of questioning is probably sourced in this way of thinking. Behavioral difference questions. Therapists use behavioral difference questions when clients start labeling people and assuming that a particular behavior is part of a person's inherent personality, which we know that can be true. For example, if a child claims my mom's a nag, the therapist would ask, what does she do that makes her a nag? The description of the problem behavior tell me to do things is then compared with others. How does your dad ask you to do things? Your teacher, how do you ask others to do things? Again, it's almost a kind of deconstruction. Of course, it's not saying that, but I believe that this is really the source of what we would eventually call narrative therapy. Then comparison and ranking questions, again, very similar to some kinds of questions we ask in postmodern therapy. Before and after questions, this may sound familiar to you in terms of solution-focused. When a specific event has occurred, before and after questions can be used in assessing how the event affected the family dynamic. For example, quote, did you and your mother fight more or less after your dad got sick? So you can see how stressors and lifespan developmental issues impact the family. Hypothetical circular questions. Hypothetical questions are used to offer a scenario and have a family member describe how each is likely to respond. For example, if mom were suddenly placed in the hospital, who would be the most likely person at her bedside, the less likely? Boy, these examples are definitely very, very heteronormative. Well, what do you expect, right? Okay, so this is some example about how Milan differs from MRI. MRI is more action-oriented. The Milan school is more kind of almost deconstructive in terms of its language focus, its emphasis on circular questioning, its emphasis on the way it breaks down certain kinds of questions that can be asked, behavior, sequence questions, behavioral difference questions, comparison and ranking questions, before and after questions, and hypothetical circular questions. So that's all good stuff to get a feel for how this line of thinking is different from MRI. And then you could read a little bit more on your own on page 85 in terms of the therapeutic relationship, the notion of curiosity and aesthetics, irreverence, and the therapist's unavoidable influence. And you might see just by how the terms of epistemology on page 88 and epistemological errors, which have to, epistemology is the theory of knowledge that we're using, really set the stage for the development of narrative therapy and what we'll eventually call postmodernism. If you look at page 90 and 91, again, there's some really nice stuff about case conceptualization. I'd like for you to take a look at these pages, and after we are all done with this, I'm going to ask you some questions. There's a cute little something or other on page 95 about sexual identity diversity. I mean, it's a taste of what we really should be talking a lot more about. Understanding heterosexism, therapist self-reflexivity. Again, by the time you get to page 96, you are done with this chapter, and we can move on to strategic therapy, which I'm not a huge fan of, and then we'll get to structural in the next video. Okay, so we're getting through this, and I'm so excited to be teaching you this way. It's a whole new frontier for me. I just can't wait to do more of this kind of thing.